As the ancient scholar and wandering bard known as Bret Michaels once sang, every rose has its thorn. And in South of Midnight, every good thing, every goddamn single victory you pull out of the jaws of defeat like a friggin' lion tamer flossing a big cat's molars results in another sad ass tale of continuation. And this might sound like a downer, sure, but this is South of Midnight, a game of southern myth steeped in legend and stewed along with a fine jambalaya of platforming, action moments, and legends, twisted just enough to feel familiar and alien enough to keep you moving through it. South of Midnight takes us through the world of Hazel, a woman granted the powers of the Weaver. This is basically a magical repair woman who stitches broken spirits and bonds and bad memories back together like she's working the most depressive quilt ever. Her journey starts out and is about mending a hurricane-ravaged hometown back together and figuring out where her mother went as the house that was on stilts that starts out the game collapses into floodwaters. If that sounds depressing, stick around, because magic isn't all it's cracked up to be in Compulsion Games' action-adventure title. So here's my review for South of Midnight. Beating the shit out of memories with crochet needles, bad parenting, and catfish one-liners.
No. You know how the water's starting to smell like pig shit? Well, I'm breathing that.
First up, a little bit about the story. South of Midnight sets the scale of danger pretty quickly. It goes from a giant storm to your house hang 10 and down a bunch of floodwaters, and sets off with you just getting a smidge of a view of some spider creature thunder stomping through the woods to entice you and cause you to move forward. For every single chapter, there's a story contained within the characters that you meet through it, each tied intrinsically to their pain, suffering, loss, or sorrow, which may sound like the same thing, but if South of Midnight shows you anything, it's that they aren't always. Platforming between sections are facilitated by the whole trinity that we've seen in games prior: the familiar and safe double dash, the short glide with secrets and journals and otherwise hidden around the game world that you can get to, especially when you want to stray off the occasional beaten path or figure out some kind of puzzle. Mixing and matching the moves gets you through all the locations, sometimes bouncing between each move, and as the game progresses through the levels, building up in a bit of complexity, though it's never punishingly tight. In fact, the game's platforming is surprisingly easygoing in its requirements, instead aiming for exploration and light puzzle work versus friggin' crackerjack timing requirements. Hazel's newfound power also is unlocked and unfolds with each level. It's put to use in the platforming, creating solid objects out of memories to leap on, moving spectral rail cars to get to unclimbable areas, and fighting your way through bramble and vines that grow up where evil lives. The easiest way to look at it is if Psychonauts 2 is exploratory platforming that exposes gamers to an ever-expanding repertoire of tools and reusable gadgets, a game like South of Midnight is an experience platforming game. The game's tools and gameplay reagents mixed together to tell a story with less exploration, though not absolutely not there, and more experience, moving the player more easily from moment to moment, while requiring you, the player, to clear locations during the fighting sections, and then you get a cutscene to reward you. While exploring, the game does have sectioned off areas that are a little bit like The Last Devil May Cry in a way, where a gate closes and battle opens up. Now, in battle, you can lock onto enemies or run around freely, using a button for light attacks and holding it down for power attacks. As Hazel grows in power, she's able to perform more moves that you can get from a skill list. Nothing really special here, from yanking enemies towards you to whipping your weaving blades around you to hit every single enemy that is encircled. But dodge and a good use of it is vital here, especially on the harder difficulties. Some enemies can interrupt your combos even as you are doing damage, and learning when to push it for a hard hit or when to jet aside is the difference between getting a couple hits in and dying, or possibly using the healing flowers that are around the areas that you can top off on. It works well enough, and while not complex, the majority of the enemies are tenacious, and a good mix of them can make it so that healing, bouncing around, and trying to figure out where you're going to go is set against different enemies. For example, ones that burrow into the ground, others that fly, and all of them can go into frenzy attacks, which makes them temporarily immune to damage, which works to keep you on your toes. While there aren't that many moves that you can get as Hazel, each one is pretty distinct. The ability to leap back and jump forward in a dodge changes the way you can enter and leave combat. Now, combat is not always the smoothest, especially when 5 ethereal gray demons are trying to kill you and they're out of sight, and another one's burrowing into the ground, dune worming its way to your location. And just as you dive out of the way, another one releases explosive liquid somewhere nearby you. These giant flies that are not only bothersome, but they're there enough just to break your concentration. Now, after defeating each section, you destroy the memory that's causing the corruption, and if it's a larger story-based memory, you move the plot forward. Otherwise, you get rewards in the form of the game's currency to purchase skills and then move on. What starts out as solitary as a game of solo discovery turns into a who's who of characters, though. The first you meet is a talking catfish who, once you help them escape a predicament, decides to give you some southern hospitality and let you climb on his back and move around the game world. The same can be said for when you you unlock your partner, Crouton, a strange magic crime who looks like they were put together by someone who played Little Nightmares one too many times. A burlap sack, an odd, old cloth automaton with buttons for eyes. If this is your pal, then you probably know what the enemies are going to look like. What I love about this character is it's a bit of humor in an otherwise pretty dire game. Even his animations when he moves around, a bobbling, misbalanced little dude trundle lopping his way through the game world to get into spaces that Hazel can't, because apparently her knees are so bad from all the jumping, so she can't go prone. The game just keeps throwing interesting characters at you, from those whose griefs have caused the Haints to grow up, those are the enemies you fight, to others who just want to help you, or at least seem to. The great thing about South of Midnight is its overall excellent pacing here. Other than a particular in section that felt like someone really liked Avengers Stingers and decided to keep throwing just one more thing at you, the game keeps going at a pretty fast pace, moving from exploration to discovery to battle and back again with almost no real pauses other than those needed for chapter breaks where Catfish sits up and regales you with stories about your current journey. What I liked about the story here and the way everything fit together is in many ways South of Midnight is in particular a ghost story set within a disaster story, a treatise on pain and suffering and what it can cause, but also a bit of a reminder that the past doesn't make us everything we are. It just builds a foundation, and it's our choices that ultimately fashion who we are from inside and out. And the more it dives into the histories, the creation of the Haints, and even Hazel's past and family heritage, the excellent duality rises up as you begin to worry about Hazel herself and the actions you're taking. And I love that. How much can you rub against the pain of history without getting some on yourself? That's the question. What surprised me consistently through this game was a level of verticality in the levels. You may think of South and think swamps and old homes crowded and choked with different types of ivy. Sure, that's all here. But there's also a lot of incredible vistas and sections of climbing and consistently having you look back and forth throughout the game world. I do in particular wish the combat was a bit deeper though, just for pure experimentation's sake. But as a linear platformer, one that is an experienced platformer at its heart, it worked well. What also worked incredibly well here, but is going to be divisive, is the music.
I remember my brother, his fate was so cruel. He saw things so different, branded a fool.
Themes and tracks hit not only in the weapon strikes, but when platforming even, or leaping during combat, with vocals pinging out when you double jump. Loved it. South of Midnight is a game about traditions, but it's inherently untraditional in its musical styles, at least when it comes to what gamers may expect. The soundtrack seamlessly weaves together genres native to the American South. You got blues and country, bluegrass, and others performed by local artists, as well as the gospel children's choir. All of these different kinds of styles coming together, and it can feel a bit disjointed. As you explore, if you listen closely, each boss of the location is mirrored in the vocals and reflected back in the music. Choirs lightly call out the boss's name or what they are and whispers bit by bit about them in the level as you progress to them. That was phenomenal. Then it'll break to a song with the lyrics telling the tale of the main Haint and how it came to be. So musically, this is a phenomenal expression of difference to one group, gamers, but an excellent reflection of the South and its diverse musical history to people who understand that. I will say one thing, and this is just something to be noted. Much of the music isn't the typical fashion you may be accustomed to, especially when it comes to lyrics, their beat, rhythm, and overall rhyme, not always matching when you may expect it. There was this feeling of dread that built up, and I can say that in a lot of musical tracks, regardless of how orchestral they are, or dire, or having a nice synth vibe, I can't say that happens all the time. That was cool. When it comes to the sound, South of Midnight's sound works on two levels. The first is purely environmental. The distant slosh of swampy lakes as a wave hits you and warns you that something huge is out there trolling around for adventurers, or the various environmental samples directly from the South. The other is during combat, with small nudges and stingers and little audio cues to tell you that a hit came in a bit too late to break through an enemy's invulnerability, or the large wide sounds of explosions as you squeeze the power from an enemy's corpse to top off your own energy to perform another special. This is also where I have to shout out the sound design team. There's something here. It's a larger, more wide open soundscape for the bigger hits in particular, as well as the phenomenal use of effects on voices. Hazel calling out in the swamp has an insane amount of echo. It feels almost impossibly wide. And in many games that can get lost. This also tightens down tremendously when inside old decrepit riverboats or diving deep into mountains. Also, non-vocal characters get their nod here, like your companion Crouton, who has these odd titters and scared sounds when he's exploring and looking into a cave. It's a light touch. It could have been overdone, especially for some of the characters later in the game, but overall, really good. Voices for everyone here are great. Hazel herself is one part spoiled kid, one part smart enough teen to know things are going weird, and that's matched with Catfish, who consistently one-liners his way through the trip. Not so comical to laugh out loud funny, but he does offer a few moments of levity in what is otherwise a completely shit situation. These are combined with all manner of other characters, mostly voiced, and some goddamned amazing ones later on that probably rear into spoiler territory, so I'm not going to go there. But ultimately, even with the sometimes odd mix of current day slang with the stories, which hasn't always worked with other games, and the southern myths mixed together, still damned good. When it comes to one thing that isn't the greatest, though, it's performance. Now, this game can look absolutely fantastic, especially when it's deep into the mythology of the South, from Two-Toed Tom to one-liner dropping Catfish, as I said before. However, the stop motion, listen, even though you can turn it off, the overall effect still sticks around in the cutscenes somewhat, and definitely in the animations, even if they're in-game cutscenes. And you do have a higher FPS version of it by just basically turning that off in the options, but it still sticks around in many places. And this may turn people off. And when combined with the chiseled from clay look of the main characters, it's just odd at times. It's got high detail major characters that you meet and face, but a lot of times you look at it and you think to yourself, it doesn't feel smooth. Well, it's not necessarily supposed to feel smooth, but you see such excellent work and you sort of wish it was. South of Midnight reminded me of the Spider-Verse in that way, in that cartoon. The animation style may not be for everybody. It's not like it hasn't been seen before. I spent most of my game with the main options for it off, which raises that sample rate of the stop motion. That being said, I do love Hazel's animations for the most part, or some of them. Most of them are bog standard, but when she finally cleans up a place of the Haint, her push-pull with the magical root that she needs to destroy is awesome. The level design is also very good. You have flooded locations that add a bit of duality. First in the fiction, presenting an almost war-torn area where man, building, and animal alike haven't been able to get along, and nothing is left unscathed of the floodwaters that have absolutely blasted everything, offering nice ways for you to figure out shorter paths through long areas, or utilizing your best friend, the world's scariest children's doll. Each location does offer something unique. Now on the Xbox it runs at 60 FPS, but I did notice a couple drops. They have patches on the way for this before it goes prime time, and the sections with the FPS drop didn't ruin gameplay, but they were evident. Also noticeable is that it does have a large number of low detail textures. I mean, Christ, it looks like it's filtered through a goddamn pink eye filter at times. There are particular locations, whether it be in cutscenes or just running around, where textures didn't load. Lastly, and one thing that does crop up on the Xbox Series X version, that's the one I had, there's a noticeable swim behind moving objects sometimes in the cutscenes. It looks like almost a wonky FSR implementation or something. In gameplay, it was not noticeable, or not as noticeable as in some of the cutscenes. It depended on what the characters were in front of, and you would see that as a noticeable ghost image shimmer that occurred right behind the main character. Now, when it comes to everything put together, how fun is it? First, I would say I was worried the game would overstay its welcome, especially as dire as it really is, or worse yet, feel as if the combat got boring with just over a dozen skills or upgrades, especially as it can take anywhere from 10 to 14 hours to work through this, depending on what you choose and the little spots you want to explore. And at times it did, especially right at the ending. The developers seem to have worked hard on making sure that the pacing never feels overwhelming on one section or the other, and as I said, it moves very fast between sections, but it did extend out in the last elements. South of Midnight was a pleasant surprise, though, in many ways. It gets started quickly enough, it dives into the plot with very little hesitation, and keeps everything moving. The platforming also works really well, even if it's not an example of finesse, and the combat goes from very fun to serviceable. It just really depends on who you're fighting and how far you are into the game. Also, it doesn't hurt that the game's soundscape is so good. Sure, there are places to explore. You can find enough skill point to really buy every skill in the game. But even if you don't do that, it's not necessarily a short game. And that brings us to the rating. This game is on Game Pass. First of all, I have to say, absolutely worth checking out on Game Pass. Not a perfect game, and there are some elements here or there, especially the technical ones, and the music might put people off. But I would say, as a Game Pass title, this is for sure worth downloading and checking out if you're a fan of these linear kind of exploratory platformers. That's awesome. You can also buy it for $40 though. So if you don't have Game Pass, I would personally say to wait when it comes to the $40 option, because let's be honest, it's got some FPS issues. Also, that frame timing that they do and that motion stop kind of look, that can actually make some people sick, as we've heard with the Spider-Verse and even with the old movies. So it may not be a title that you want to jump into and risk your $40 if that might be you. Overall, I think what got me was I enjoyed Hazel's story, and we just rarely get games based in the South. The idea of exploring that and not being held back with crackerjack style timing when it came to the platformer, and just meeting all these different characters that I've heard about in the past was awesome. One of those games that just hit and misses a little too much for me to say go out and spend 40. But as a Game Pass game, yeah. Absolutely no question. Anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys like the videos. If you do, give it a thumbs up. Check out Patreon. And remember, no sponsored bullshit. If I dislike a game, it's because I dislike it. If I like it, it's because I like it. Ain't no money, no trips, nothing going on like that on this channel. If you want to hear more about the game or any games that are coming up, games that maybe I didn't get a chance to review, check out the Best Gaming Podcast channel on YouTube, where me and a couple of friends just sit down to BS about games for 3 to 4 hours every single Friday at 10:30 a.m. Link is in the description. Peace out.